The history books are full of incredible achievements, but, well, rarely do we study a mission that was a spectacular failure of objective, yet a profound triumph of human will.
Hmm.
Today, we are piercing the veneer of one of the 20th century's most legendary survival epics, Sir Ernest Shackleton's Imperial Trans-Antarctic Expedition, 1914 to 1917.
It's really the story of the Endurance, isn't it? An appropriate name for a ship and for a crew that would face annihilation.
Absolutely.
Our deep dive today is directly into Shackleton's own accounts, which, allows us to feel the weight of his leadership under that kind of pressure. We're here to provide you with a shortcut, really, to understanding this immense journey.
So we'll be tracing the initial, almost impossible vision.
Yes, the catastrophic loss of their vessel, the Endurance, and then the split narrative of survival. You have the Weddell Sea party, and then the tragic sacrifices of the Ross Sea party.
This expedition presents such a profound paradox. The grand stated goal, the first crossing of the Antarctic continent from sea to sea, it just never happened.
Nope. Total failure on that front. The continent itself fought back.
Yeah, exactly. Yet the subsequent fight for the lives of every single member of the main party,
Yeah.
well, that cemented Shackleton's place in history. So our mission today is to understand how that human triumph emerged from, frankly, logistical and environmental ruin.
And we'll be dissecting the strategies, the ingenious survival methods they came up with, and the sheer cost.
Right.
We need to ensure that the often overlooked struggles of the men on the far side of the continent, the Ross Sea Party, are recognized for their bravery and loyalty too.
Definitely. So let's start at the beginning with an ambition that really just dwarfed all previous Antarctic endeavors. Okay, let's unpack this vision.
Yeah.
By 1914, the geographical South Pole had been claimed by Amundsen, right?
Mm.
Beating Scott by a narrow margin.
Correct.
For Shackleton, the age of discovery wasn't over. It had simply shifted its focus. So what was the next great prize?
Well, Shackleton himself defined it pretty clearly. He said the crossing of the South Polar continent from sea to sea remained the one great main object of Antarctic journeyings.
Wow.
For him, this was the last major geographical feat left down there, and he was absolutely determined it should be achieved by a British expedition, restoring some of the national prestige lost in that race to the pole.
And the scale of this ambition was truly colossal.
Yeah.
We are talking about mapping and traveling across 1,800 miles of completely unknown territory.
1,800 miles. Just think about that.
And the plan wasn't just ambitious. It was based on extreme speed, aiming to complete the transcontinental journey in only 120 days.
Yeah, that speed requirement was non-negotiable. It was dictated by the cycle of the Antarctic summer and the sheer logistics of supplying such a journey.
Right, you couldn't just hang around.
No, you couldn't dawdle. Shackleton planned to use dog teams, of course, which were essential, but he also pinned his hopes on some pretty cutting-edge technology for the time. 2 motor sledges fitted with aerial propellers.
Aerial propellers, wow.
Yeah, the idea was that these would just glide over the snow and ice, vastly increasing their mileage capability, especially over the flatter bits, like the barrier, before they hit the mountains heading north.
That's a crucial point, isn't it? Blending the old dogs with the new, these motor sledges. Did the public get the risk and the magnitude? The sources say interest was huge.
Oh, absolutely overwhelming. Shackleton got nearly 5,000 applications, people desperate to join the adventure.
5,000.
Men from all classes, all walks of life, doctors, engineers, sailors, even poets, apparently. Out of that massive pool, only 56 were ultimately chosen for the whole thing.
Wow.
That selection rate tells you something about the elite nature and the high stakes of the mission.
But before they could even face the ice, Shackleton faced a different kind of crushing pressure, money, or lack of it.
Right. He writes about great disappointment and anxiety when funds he'd been promised just vanished. Suddenly, he couldn't cover the costs of the ship, the staff contracts.
So he was a brilliant explorer, but maybe not the best fundraiser.
Sometimes, yeah, maybe a bit chaotic on that front. The expedition was essentially rescued by philanthropy. We have to acknowledge the crucial £10,000 grant from the British government. That gave some immediate stability.
Okay.
But the often unsung hero here is Dame Janet Stancomb-Wills. Her substantial generosity funded essential equipment, including those critical lifeboats.
And the irony there is just incredible.
Isn't it? She paid for the boats that would ultimately save the men when the ship they were meant to serve was crushed and sunk.
Wow. Okay, here's where the timing becomes historically fascinating. August 3rd, 1914. As the expedition is getting ready to leave Britain, news arrives. General mobilization across Europe.
The Great War had begun.
An immediate crisis of conscience, surely.
Absolutely. Shackleton immediately offered the ships, the stores, the entire cruise services to the Admiralty. He was prepared to abandon the Antarctic mission for the national war effort.
But they didn't take him up on it.
No. In an incredible historical footnote, the Admiralty's famous reply, sent back by telegram, basically said, "Proceed." Yeah. They recognized that while war was raging, the spirit of geographical discovery and perseverance still held, well, strategic and moral importance. So the Endurance sailed into the unknown while the world plunged into what Shackleton called the Red Horror.
That decision just underscores the immense complexity of the plan they carried out. The dual-party plan. This crossing didn't just rely on the Endurance crew.
No, not at all. It hinged on two completely separate expeditions operating on opposite sides of the continent, 1,800 miles apart.
Logistically, that sounds like a staggering gamble, double the failure point.
It really was. First, you had the Weddell Sea party aboard the Endurance. Their plan was to land 14 men at Weddell Bay.
Okay.
6 of those men would actually make the crossing attempt, the others. They were tasked with vital scientific work, geology, glaciology, meteorology, plus exploration of Graham Land and Enderby Land.
And their success, actually their survival, was entirely dependent upon the work of the other crew.
The Ross Sea party, thousands of miles away, operating from McMurdo Sound aboard the ship Aurora.
Right. Their mission was pretty unsung, wasn't it? Purely supportive.
Entirely. 6 men were tasked with laying down essential supply depots right across the continent near Mount Buckley at the head of the Beardmore Glacier.
Ah, so that's where the crossing party hoped to emerge.
Exactly. If they somehow survived the 1,800-mile trek, they'd arrive there starving and exhausted. Without those pre-positioned supplies, the Weddell Sea party's goal wasn't just difficult, it was instantly fatal.
That dual dependency created this incredible, almost tragic bond between two groups that would never actually meet.
Precisely. A lifeline stretched across a continent, held by strangers.
Okay, so with the plan set, the Endurance left South Georgia Grytviken late in 1914. Shackleton chose a course further east, right, near the 15th meridian west longitude.
Yes, he did. And that was based on specific warnings he got from experienced whaling captains. They told him about unusually heavy ice further west that year.
Smart to listen to the experts.
It was, but the Weddell Sea is just a particularly treacherous body of water. It's infamous for swallowing ships.
And from the start, the expedition relied not just on the men, but on their canine crew.
Oh, absolutely. They were massive, sturdy animals specifically selected for their endurance and strength. Essential.
And the men developed such an enthusiastic, almost familial relationship with them that the names are fantastic.
They really are. You hear names like Amundsen naturally, but also Hackenschmidt, the famous wrestler, the tenor Caruso, Ulysses, Skippy, even Shakespeare. The dogs were absolutely central to their existence, not just as labor, but as companions. They represented movement, speed, the possibility of getting home.
But that possibility of movement soon vanished.
Yeah.
The ship quickly entered dense pack ice.
Yeah.
This is where the source material gets intensely descriptive about the terrifying physics of ice compression.
It really does. It was described as a silent, slow-motion conflict, but devastatingly powerful. The crew watched the physics of the ice pack under pressure, heavy floes grinding against each other, rearing up into high hedgerows, he called them, or creating these chaotic areas of piled-up blocks, sometimes reaching 5 or 6 feet high, forming domes and canyons in the ice.
And the sounds.
Shackleton noted the sounds, not loud crashes necessarily, but this terrible grinding and groaning that just signaled destruction. When the pressure renewed, these domes would sometimes burst upward like a volcano.
By late December 1914, the inevitable happened. The ship was trapped. Just became a piece of cargo in this huge, slow-moving conveyor belt of ice.
Exactly. And that's the crucial psychological difference, isn't it, between being stuck and being utterly helpless. Leads or breaks in the ice kept opening up.
Oh, a bit of hope.
Well, yes and no. They only opened to the north, northeast, or northwest. The whole pack was drifting backward, counter to their objective.
Oh, no.
Shackleton realized pretty quickly that by the spring thaw, they'd be way too far northwest of their target, Weddell Bay.
Right?
Landing and starting the crossing would be impossible.
So the mission effectively failed right there, nearly a year before the ship was even lost.
Yeah. In essence, yes. The primary objective was already gone. They were forced into this strange, suspended reality, living for months trapped in the pack.
So how did morale hold up? knowing they were drifting further and further from their goal.
Morale was maintained mainly by structure and distraction. They kept a rigorous daily schedule. They held sing-songs in their quarters, which they amusingly called the Ritz.
The Ritz, dark humor.
Right, a nod to the irony of their situation. Shackleton understood that idleness was the enemy of the spirit. Keep them busy, keep them focused.
And the ultimate distraction, a burst of pure, silly human energy, was the Antarctic Derby in July 1915.
Ah, yes, the Derby. It became legendary amongst the crew. They staged a proper dog race over a 700-yard course.
No way.
Oh, yes. They treated it with absolute seriousness, too. Posted betting odds on a box, settled wagers with stores of chocolate and cigarettes. It was a vital, fleeting moment of normalcy and, competitive energy.
Good stories from it.
Well, in one race, Shackleton himself was part of the load being pulled by Frank Wild's team. Apparently, he skidded off the sledge near the finish line, getting the team disqualified.
Even the boss wasn't immune.
Shows you the dedication to the diversion, right?
But the fun was only temporary. That relentless, continuous pressure of the ice just kept bearing down. What was the mechanism of the ship's final destruction?
The ice basically squeezed the Endurance like a seed in a vice. Simple, brutal physics. On October 27th, 1915, Shackleton gave the inevitable order: abandon ship.
Must have been heartbreaking.
And terrifying. The sounds were horrific. He described the vessel as groaning like a living thing, her sides collapsing inwards and then reopening as the pressure changed.
Wow.
The source specifically mentions heavy iron davits, the frames holding the lifeboats being twisted and bent like the ironwork of a wrecked train. The Endurance was robust, but she wasn't an icebreaker. She just stood no chance against those forces.
That image, the iron twisted like wire, it's visceral. But the ship didn't sink immediately, did it? It stayed caught in the pack.
That's right. It was held up for a while by thick ice spurs that had driven right through the hull. The crew settled onto the ice floe nearby, watching their home, their refuge, slowly die.
How long did that last?
Until November 21st, 1915. Shackleton vividly recalls the ship's carpenter, McNeish, the boss, calling out the news. "She's going, boys!" God. The men gathered, watching their ship silently upend and find its last resting place in the frigid water. Shackleton recorded it as a moment not without its pathos, a true, quiet burial for the ship that carried all their hopes south.
So with the Endurance gone, the immediate reality became survival on the floe. They set up their first floating base, calling it Ocean Camp.
Yep. And the hierarchy of needs was stark, wasn't it? Food, shelter, fuel, that's it.
How did they manage?
Through really ingenious improvisation, the big challenge was cooking the seal and penguin meat, which quickly became their sole food source. They needed fuel.
Blubber, right?
Exactly. But they needed something to burn it in. They solved the fuel problem by contriving a blubber stove. They took the ship's steel ash chute after an initial attempt with an iron oil drum failed and fashioned it into a robust stove. Seals and penguins literally became their currency. They provided the calories, and the blubber provided the fuel to cook them.
Psychologically, Shackleton had to manage not just the cold and hunger, but the inevitable squabbles over meager rations. That rationing method he devised is just brilliant leadership.
It really is a textbook example of ensuring fair process. Rations were incredibly strict, almost entirely seal and penguin by this point.
Yeah.
To ensure absolute psychological fairness, to stop anyone thinking someone else was getting more, the food was meticulously divided into equal portions. Then, one man, often Frank Wild, would close his eyes or turn his head away.
Ah, the blind draw.
Exactly. And he'd call out the names at random as the portions were pointed to, like, "School day's over again," Shackleton wrote.
So scarcity became a shared fate, totally divorced from the leader's personal decision. If you got a smaller piece of biscuit, well, that was just bad luck.
Precisely. It made the tough decisions transparently impartial. And the crew, in turn, found ways to stretch things, creating a pudding from discarded biscuit dust and dripping, for example.
Amazing. And even then, they kept their minds active. They saved a portion of the Encyclopedia Britannica.
They did. A great treasure. But not just for knowledge.
No. What else?
It became a peacekeeper. Apparently, arguments would break out over obscure facts about plants, animals, history, whatever, and they'd be settled instantly by checking the encyclopedia.
Huh. A referee?
And yes, a crucial secondary use was discovered later. When matches became really scarce, they realized the paper, impregnated with saltpeter from the salty sea air, worked wonderfully as a pipe lighter.
Knowledge was quite literally life-saving fuel.
You could say that.
They weren't just passive, though. There was that initial attempt to march to Paulet Island. which failed pretty miserably.
Oh, it was a brutal effort and quickly abandoned. The surface was just too shattered and soft. Imagine trying to haul heavy lifeboats over that.
Impossible.
They found they had to triple relay every piece of equipment and the boats forward. Progress was negligible, and the energy cost was completely unsustainable. They realized the pack was their prison, and they just had to rely on its drift.
So they settled at Patience Camp.
A very appropriate name, wasn't it?
Extremely. A floating lump of ice that was continually splitting and melting beneath them for nearly 2 months. Grim.
Patience finally ran out in April 1916.
Yeah, the ice raft was just disintegrating entirely under the influence of the ocean swell. It forced them to launch the 3 remaining lifeboats, the James Caird, the Stancomb Wills, and the third unnamed boat.
Their only hope now was reaching land.
The nearest land, yes, Elephant Island or Clarence Island, before they were swamped in the open ocean.
That initial boat journey, cramming 28 men into 3 small boats, must have been horrifying. What were the specific hardships during those 5 days? Constant, severe discomfort. The boats were heavily laden, often flooded with icy water. Saltwater spray aggravated their thirst terribly.
The worst combination.
Shackleton notes the only dry things aboard the boats were swollen mouths and burning tongues. Temperatures were bitter. Men felt themselves drifting towards delirium, towards death from exposure.
I think the small acts of loyalty and care in those extreme moments are the most telling parts of the story.
They really are the narrative pulse. There's that powerful anecdote about Greenstreet, one of the officers. His right foot became badly frostbitten.
Yeah.
A companion named Lees performed this incredibly intimate act of care, saved the foot by holding it in his sweater against his stomach to restore circulation through body heat.
Wow.
It was that constant self-sacrificing attention to detail to each other that kept the men alive.
And on April 15th, 1916, they finally made landfall on Elephant Island, their first solid footing in 497 days.
497 days on drifting ice or water. Incredible.
But Elephant Island wasn't exactly a sanctuary, was it? More like a temporary reprieve.
Not at all. It was exposed, rocky, utterly desolate. But crucially, it was land. Solid ground.
So the 22 men remaining there had to establish some kind of camp immediately.
They did. They used the 2 remaining lifeboats, the Stancomb Wills, and the other one turned them upside down, used stones to build low walls, salvaged canvas for a roof. They constructed the Endurance hut.
So it's pretty basic.
Extremely crude. It only had a 4-foot, 6-inch high ceiling, so the men had to walk bent double or literally crawl on all fours inside. But it provided essential shelter from the constant wind and snow.
Safe from the sea, finally.
Yes. But still utterly isolated from the rest of the world. Nobody knew they were there.
Okay, so it became immediately clear to Shackleton that rescue wasn't coming to Elephant Island. No one even knew where they were.
Exactly. He had to go get help.
Which led to the decision that really defines this entire saga. That terrifying 800-mile open boat voyage to the nearest civilized outpost, South Georgia.
800 miles across the Southern Ocean, arguably the most tempestuous stretch of water on the planet, south of Cape Horn. In a 22-foot lifeboat.
It's just mind-boggling.
It was an act of supreme desperation, really. They chose the most seaworthy of the 3 boats, the James Caird, named after one of the expedition's key sponsors.
And selected just 6 men for the mission.
Yes. Shackleton, Worsley the navigator, Crean, McNeish the carpenter, McCarthy, and Vincent the sailors. And the boat itself had to be reinforced for the open sea.
How did they do that?
McNeish worked wonders. They built up the sides and created a makeshift cover, a rudimentary deck, using canvas, box lids from packing cases, even sledge runners, all nailed over the top.
Trying to keep the worst of the seas out.
Trying. Shackleton noted it looked a bit like stage scenery, flimsy, but it was their only chance to shed the massive waves they knew they'd face.
The journey lasted 16 days, battling some of the worst seas on Earth. And the most harrowing moment came just 3 days out.
Yes. The source describes them being struck by what Shackleton called a gigantic wave, a mighty upheaval of the ocean.
Not just a big swell, then.
No, this was different. Shackleton, who had 26 years of experience at sea, was taken completely by surprise. He apparently shouted, "For God's sake, hold on, it's got us."
Killing.
The wave just surged over the tiny boat, threatening to swamp it entirely. It was a critical test of McNeish's hasty reinforcement work.
And it held.
Thankfully, yes, it held, allowing the 6 exhausted men to bail desperately for their lives in the freezing water.
They succeeded. navigating largely by guesswork and Worsley's incredible skill with minimal sightings.
Yeah.
But after 16 days, they landed on the wrong side of South Georgia.
Right, the uninhabited, rugged southwestern coastline. Wild cliffs, no settlements.
So the ordeal wasn't over.
Far from it. They realized they had to cross the island's interior about 30 miles as the crow flies, but over 150 miles of actual travel across unnamed mountains, heavily crevassed glaciers, and treacherous passes to reach the whaling station at Stromness on the other side.
And they had no proper maps, no climbing gear, and were severely weakened from weeks of near starvation and dehydration on the boat journey.
It was an insane undertaking.
It was during this grueling, non-stop 36-hour trek across the island that the famous psychological phenomenon occurred. The invisible companion.
Yes. Shackleton, Worsley, and Crean. The three men who made that final push across the mountains, McNeish and Vincent were too weak, all confessed independently afterwards that they strongly felt the presence of another person with us.
All three felt it.
All three. This shared sensation, maybe a hallucination born of extreme stress, maybe something else. It became a subject very near to our hearts, as Shackleton put it. It suggests the extreme duress has stripped away the superficial, reaching what he later called the naked soul of man.
Imagine the sight they presented when they finally stumbled down toward Stromness whaling station.
Oh, I mean, they were in absolute rags, utterly filthy, hair-matted, faces black from blubber smoke, frostbitten, wild-eyed, feral-looking. Shackleton's account notes that two small boys they first encountered just ran away screaming in fear.
Can't blame them.
They eventually met an old whaling foreman who, incredibly, recognized Shackleton. Their identity was quickly confirmed. Within hours, they were clean, shaved, dressed in new clothes, eating hot food, civilized again after nearly 2 years in the wilderness.
But the focus immediately shifted, didn't it? From their own survival to the 22 men still stranded, waiting on Elephant Island.
Immediately. Shackleton's job wasn't over. He instantly began organizing the rescue, which proved agonizingly difficult.
Why so hard?
The ice pack around Elephant Island was still formidable, especially as winter deepened. Rescuing the men required 4 increasingly desperate attempts over the next 4 months.
4 attempts.
Yes, he had to rely on international aid. The British government, strained by the war, couldn't provide immediate relief. Crucially, the Chilean and Uruguayan governments offered resources and ships.
While back on Elephant Island, the men were sustained largely by hope, fostered by Frank Wild.
Absolutely. Wild, left in command, was magnificent. He never allowed the men to sink into despair. He kept the camp disciplined, routines going, and crucially, he kept hope alive.
Now,
Whenever the sea cleared momentarily of ice, even for a short while, he would apparently declare, "Roll up your sleeping bags, boys. The boss may come today."
building psychological resilience through ritual and expectation.
Exactly. Constant reinforcement that rescue was possible, that Shackleton wouldn't give up.
And the culmination of this entire epic came on August 30th, 1916.
The Chilean steam trawler Yelcho, a small, unsuitable vessel but skippered by the incredibly brave Luis Pardo, finally broke through the ice and fog.
What was that moment like?
The sight of the ship was so unexpected, so overwhelming, that the men inside the hut literally tore down the canvas walls in their frantic excitement to see it clearly. Shackleton, on the Yelcho, shouted the question they had waited months, years to hear answered, "Are you all well?"
And the famous reply.
Simple, clear across the water, all safe, all well. Every single member of the Weddell Sea party had been saved. An unparalleled victory of leadership and endurance.
But our deep dive can't end there, can it? We have to pivot now to the immense and frankly tragic cost paid by the other half of the mission.
We absolutely must, the Ross Sea parter. They didn't experience this ultimate triumph of survival. In many ways, they were the victims of their own loyalty and sense of duty.
This is the part of the story that gets truly overlooked, I think. The outline stresses they didn't have the good fortune of being under Shackleton's direct command in that survival situation. They were led by Aeneas McIntosh.
And their mission was sacrificial from the start. Their difficulties began almost before the Endurance even left England, actually. The Aurora, their base ship, was blown out to sea from its winter mooring in McMurdo Sound in May 1915.
Blown out to sea, with men ashore.
Yes. It drifted, trapped in ice, for 9 agonizing months. This was an absolute existential crisis for the shore party. 10 men were left stranded with severely depleted stores and equipment. Crucially, they lacked the fresh supplies and most of the dogs needed for the coming depot-laying season.
That sounds like a logistical disaster that should have triggered an immediate halt to the mission. Why on earth did they proceed?
Duty. Pure, simple, brutal duty. They knew the crossing party, Shackleton's men, who were already trapped in the Weddell Sea ice, though the Ross Sea party didn't know the extent of it yet, would be utterly doomed if those depots weren't laid near the Beardmore Glacier.
Even with depleted resources.
Yes. Despite the extreme lack of proper food, fuel, clothing, and dogs, the shore party, led by McIntosh, made the heroic and ultimately sacrificial decision to carry out the mission anyway, to fulfill their part of the bargain.
So they spent months laying these essential depots, struggling with completely inappropriate gear and starvation rations. What were the costs?
The cost was health and ultimately life. The lack of fresh food, the vitamin deficiencies, combined with overwhelming physical effort, led to severe scurvy among several key members.
Including the leader.
Yes. McIntosh himself, the chaplain Arnold Spencer Smith, and another man named Hayward became totally incapacitated out on the barrier. This meant the two fittest remaining men, Ernest Joyce and Richard Wild, no relation to Frank Wild on the other side, had to undertake an appalling task.
What was that?
They had to drag their 3 sick, dying companions over the ice on sledges for over 100 miles back toward the relative safety of the old Discovery hut at Hut Point.
Describe the brutality of that final slog. They weren't just dragging supplies anymore, they were dragging dying men.
Imagine it. The horrific symptoms of advanced scurvy, swollen limbs, bleeding gums, open sores, crushing exhaustion made every single inch forward a painful, slow negotiation with death. They were fighting the Antarctic environment and the decay within their own bodies and those of their comrades.
Did they all make it back?
No. Spencer Smith, a man universally described as refusing to complain despite his intense suffering, eventually died on the barrier, just miles from safety. His death just underscored the extreme danger and the incredible, futile effort put in to try and save him.
And the final, agonizing losses occurred near the very end of their ordeal.
Oh.
So close to safety.
Heartbreakingly close, yes. McIntosh and Hayward, having partially recovered but still weak, were later lost attempting to cross thinning sea ice near Hut Point, trying to reach the main base at Cape Evans. They likely broke through and drowned.
Okay.
Their deaths were an agonizing irony, occurring so close to shelter after everything they'd endured. Shackleton later argued quite rightly that their deaths were as great a sacrifice for the mission as any soldier who died in the trenches in France or Flanders.
They fulfilled their duty, laying the crucial supplies.
Supplies that the Weddell Sea party, of course, would never reach. The 7 surviving members of the Ross Sea party were finally rescued in January 1917, months after Shackleton had saved his own men from Elephant Island. #outro.
So we arrive at the ultimate outcome of the Imperial Trans-Antarctic Expedition, the primary geographical goal, a complete and total failure, thwarted by immovable ice.
Utterly. But every single member of the Weddell Sea party survived. An incredible tribute to leadership, resilience, luck. Call it what you will.
Meanwhile, the successful completion of the support mission, the depot laying by the Ross Sea party, cost 3 lives.
It really is a study in contrasting fates, isn't it? The success of survival on one side came at a high cost of loss on the other. But what's also remarkable, and often forgotten, is what happened next, when these men returned from the white warfare of the South, as Shackleton called it, and rejoined the real world war.
Right. After nearly 2 years of unimaginable hardship, most of the men who returned unscathed immediately took their places in the First World War.
And their casualty percentage in that conflict after surviving Antarctica was remarkably high. They traded one brutal battleground for another.
Any specific examples?
Frank Worsley, the brilliant navigator of the James Caird. He became a celebrated U-boat hunter in the Royal Navy Reserve. Known to his friends as Depth Charge Bill, apparently. He sank 3 German submarines and received the Distinguished Service Order. Others served and fought. Many were wounded or killed in France, Flanders, the Mediterranean. They proved their mettle twice over. It seems the Antarctic ordeal had honed their capacity for endurance under extreme stress and danger.
Shackleton himself, reflecting on their time trapped in the ice, on the floes, in the boats, he summarized the experience with a depth that really goes beyond just exploration, doesn't it? He felt they had pierced the veneer of outside things.
He did. He concluded, and it's a famous quote, that they had suffered, starved, and triumphed, groveled down, yet grasped at glory, grown bigger in the bigness of the whole. We had reached the naked soul of man.
If you look closely at his words, as you said, he never claims triumph in discovery. He claims triumph in suffering, in endurance.
Exactly. And perhaps for you, the listener, the ultimate lesson here isn't about achieving the objective. Objectives can always be crushed by circumstances beyond our control. Maybe genuine success is sometimes defined differently.
How so?
By the demonstration of unbreakable human spirit, of resilience, of leadership, of loyalty, in the face of absolute inevitable failure. That persistence, that refusal to give up, which allowed them to survive the Antarctic and then return to fight another war, maybe that is the true, enduring legacy of the Endurance.
A profound thought to end on. What does it take for a civilized person to revert to basic survival mode and yet somehow retain their essential humanity, their care for others? Something for you to perhaps ponder as you look at your own daily challenges.